Hello, everyone. I am Reverend Nick Bullitt, the engagement catalyst here at OneSpirit, and we are sitting here today with Reverend Richard Miner and Dr. Lou Cox. How are you both?
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having us. It's great to be here with you today.
Yes.
Great.
So, Nick, it's a pleasure to be here.
Great, thank you. Can both of you share a little bit about your background?
I was ordained at OneSpirit in 2013, and I have been involved with OneSpirit for many years now. I was on the board for several years. I was the graduate engagement officer for a couple of years. I'm now over at United Palace of Spiritual Arts, where I'm the creative director. So I have been creating courses and classes in the interspiritual community for several years now.
Yes, my training is in psychology. I got my PhD at Fordham, and I've been in practice for about 55 years. And I was thinking, looking back over my history as a professional and a person, that the sort of the business of becoming a more conscious person has been woven into both those paths, like my personal growth and my work.
So your workshop is called Knowing the Ego. I would love to hear your definition of the ego.
Yeah, well, that's probably going to take the workshop to do it. But it's kind of the sum of all the survival strategies that we have to put together to navigate the waters of our families and peer groups and cultures, right? Mm-hmm. And it's really kind of a effort to find a balance between our incredible need for embrace and also our need for being true to who we really are, true to our unique selves. And the ego gets created in the midst of a lot of tension between those two needs. Mm-hmm. But it's why I wrote my book. The ego is really a rather complex creature inside us and has lots of ways of acting to control us. And then it's real, it's a real something inside us.
Mm-hmm. And Richard, how would you define the ego?
It's this collection of behaviors that we acquired as we have grown up and become members of our families and our communities and our societies. And it is something that I think most people are probably not really that aware of, especially people who live in the United States in this time specifically. We are conditioned not to look inside, and we're conditioned to look outside of ourselves for affirmation and for our self-worth and those sorts of things. And that doesn't really lend itself to internal exploration, which is really necessary to understand the ego and how it works.
You have a workshop that's spread across 4 weeks. And so what would a typical day look like for the workshop?
Well, every session will be a combination of some lecture kind of mapping. So we'll be mapping the ego and how it works on the inside of people. And we'll also be mapping what I call the truth place, which is the inside heart source of true guidance, right? And we'll have a lot of dialogue with the participants. There'll be exercises around sharing and certain ways of tapping into the ego and stepping away from it. Mm-hmm. And we'll have some documents as resources.
And what do you most hope that someone gets out of taking this workshop? So if they were to walk away from this experience, what's the one thing that you would want them to take away?
I think that one of the most important things about this work is that it shows you a concrete way. It gives you tools that are easy to master, that allow you to very clearly see this ego and how it's working in ways that you may not be aware of at this juncture, and how to bypass that in a way, or to how to see it in a way that allows you to access what is underneath that, to go to what Lou calls the truth place. I call like heart-centered truth. And it is a place of amazing creativity, and a place of great compassion, and a place of great power. And when you're able to access that space easily and clearly, and in a way that you are consciously aware of how the ego is interfering with that, it gives you the ability to create and manifest things in a wholly new way that you haven't been able to do before. And I think it's a really, really powerful strategy for, especially for people that are seeking on a spiritual path, because the ego will often sabotage seekers in a way that they're not aware of. And this allows you to become aware of the ways that the ego may be sabotaging you, and learn how to deal with that in a powerful and effective, but still very simple and approachable way, which I think adds an enormous amount of value to anyone's spiritual path and gives them tools that will really help propel them forward in their journey.
Wonderful.
We have this sort of vague idea of what an ego is, and it leaves us at the mercy of it if we're not really clear of what it is and how it works. So I saw a lot of unnecessary suffering, that people would end up like blaming themselves for not moving along better on the path, or having regressions on the path, or blocks, or whatever, or same old stuff coming up again, things like that, where people really felt like somehow they were failing, when really they were being interfered with by some very automatic and pretty powerful entrenched ways of thinking and believing and feeling and operating on the inside. So one of the takeaways I would like to have is a reduction in that kind of suffering, that kind of self-critical suffering, and more compassion for what you're up against, in terms of moving away from the part of you that really thinks you have to be this way for your own safety and survival. So it takes also courage, and for people to realize that what a lot of the work on the path takes courage. To be true to yourself really does take courage. And more confidence and trust in that inner guidance system that includes their intuition, their insight, their emotional intelligence, their creativity, their felt sense of truth. Really trusting that and accessing it much more fully and with less interference from the ego, because the ego doesn't want us to go there. Thinks it's a bad idea.
Right.
There are a lot of reasons why people don't want to turn inside, right? But it's critical, if you're really going to live a free life and a full life, you have to do that inner work.